This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Shawn Kerrigan, Chief Operating Officer and Co-founder. Plus, Shawn, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me here.
Really excited to talk with you because last fall at ATA MC&E, I had the chance to ride in the Plus drive system, the Level 2 Plus. Really cool to get some experience there. Very interesting in terms of the retrofittability with current vehicles. And as we talk more about these, the ADAS and driver assistance systems, we know that it's a stepping stone toward greater levels of autonomy, right? So, and I know that you're pushing toward Level 4 autonomy. Let's start there. Where are we at with Level 4 autonomy in commercial trucks today? And is it a potential reality in your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Level 4 autonomous trucking is really the first place that we're going to see autonomous technology, driverless autonomous technology deployed at scale. Now, that said, I think that's going to be a progressive process. And actually, where we see the biggest application of this type of advanced technology is really in the driver-in Level 2 Plus or Plus Drive type system that you experienced at that ATA show. Right. So to give a little bit of background, kind of where that is and where we came from, right? So we've started out building out full stack autonomous system. And as we did that and did these types of pilots, and we've done a number of driverless demonstration projects and so on, what we found is that while the technology is really advancing and continuing to progress, there was actually a huge opportunity to make a big difference by applying that same advanced technology capability into trucks with drivers in them today. Right. Because that type of functionality can make a huge difference in terms of safety, in terms of fuel economy, and in terms of driver comfort. And so from the perspective of delivering value to customers, there was a big opportunity there. And then I also think that it's an important part of, just as you think about how this advanced technology should develop, it's really an important part of that is make sure that you've developed a really broad experience, that you're confident your system is really seeing everything that is out there to be seen. Mm-hmm. And that's an important part of the overall effort. And so that's also why we think that this progressive approach is really the only way to be confident that your technology has reached a level of maturity, that it's going to be safe to deploy in a driverless fashion someday.
Right, for sure. Well, and as you mentioned there, the Plus Drive system, Level 2, driver's still in the seat, driver's still in control. It's a driver assistance systems like we see in the market. Although you have some really cool specific functionality in your system, and I'll link to that right along because that was really cool to see. And also, there's Level 4 technology, which is fully autonomous, but there's still a person in the cab, right? There's still a driver per se in the cab, and there's Level 5, which is a vehicle that doesn't have anyone in it, right? And even to your point of not only the technology coming along, but also people getting comfortable with the technology, right? Understanding it, gaining experience on the personal side, on the fleet side, on the driver side. It's all kind of a progression that has to go along in parallel with the development of the technology, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really critically important as you think about what are some of the things that need to be done. It's I think building that confidence with drivers, building that confidence with the public and regulators, and getting people comfortable with what these types of technologies can do is really important. And you can see that in studies, right? When they do studies of how comfortable are people with the notion of eventually seeing autonomous vehicles on the road. It tends to be people who have experience dealing with really advanced automation systems in these Level 2 Plus type contexts that tend to really be most positive and understand sort of the trajectory of technology and where things are going.
Right, for sure. I want to come back to that, but before I do, talking about Level 4, I mean, we're in Level 2 now, and just for a little bit of background, it seems that everyone's kind of jumping over Level 3 because it's kind of this one foot in, 1 foot out, because you have the driver they're responsible for operation, but then the system takes over, and then the driver kind of has to jump in the middle of an event or incident. And so we go from level 2 to level 4, where the system takes over responsibility. So given that we're in level 2 right now, right, the driver's still there, driver's still fully responsible. It's an assistance system, and we're going to level 4. What do you see as like the next mile marker or two of what you want to see to get there on the road to level 4?
Well, so I think there are really two different key pieces to that. So on the one side, we actually think that as we've started to deploy the Plus Drive system, and we're really excited that we started deploying that a couple of years ago and continue to grow. We found that while we anticipated it would create a lot of value and drivers would love it, we actually, I think, underestimated the impact there in some ways, where the reception has just been really positive, and there's just been a lot of opportunities to add value in new ways. And so we think that actually this almost new category of level 2 plus type systems, we call them highly automated driving or HAD type systems, are really going to have a transformative impact on trucking and really become broadly deployed in the coming years. And it's because of just the driver experience is so different, and the impact that it can have on the safety and the fuel economy is so significant that once people experience the difference, they start to say like, hey, this will really transform trucking in a positive way. And this is something that will help recruit new drivers into the field. This will help drivers stay in the field longer. And so we expect the adoption rate to be incredibly rapid. So, I mean, that's why we do the type of events like the ATA event that you were at, where we give the opportunity for people to ride along in a truck or even drive a truck equipped with the system to get that experience and really see how it's different. And we think that actually is going to be the majority of the focus, the majority of the deployment for some years to come, because we think that's where you can actually have hugely positive impact. And you can do that on a really broad basis, because these are trucks and technology that you can operate all across the country in all different types of conditions. And you can fit them right into operations today. So it's a progressive approach to the development, and something that can make a big difference. And so we see that level 2 plus thing really has we think it's going to just continue growing and be the majority of the market. Now, towards the question of, well, what's going to happen on level 4? What are some of the things that need to take place there? I think we see it as sort of 4 major categories of things. So there's things that need to happen in terms of software, things that need to happen in terms of hardware, things that need to happen in terms of regulation, and then public acceptance. And so software, that's really where we're focused as an autonomous technology developer, is making sure that we continue to develop and extend the capabilities of the software. And on that front, and a critical part of that is actually to make sure that you really have seen all the different scenarios and things that are out there. Because fundamentally, this technology drives different than, say, you or I drive.
Right.
Where when we got a driver's license, they tested, do you know how to handle the vehicle? And because the assumption is with people is if they know how to handle a vehicle and they understand the rules of the road, they'll figure out what the right thing to do is in any given situation. And when it comes to autonomous vehicles, it's actually like the hard part is quite the opposite, where the driver's test isn't so, the hard part isn't, do you know how to handle a vehicle? Teaching an autonomous system to handle normal driving characteristics and follow rules of the road is not the hardest part of the problem. The hardest part of the problem is being confident that the system will interpret all the things that could happen out there on the road in the right way and react in the safest possible way. Right. Because there is no artificial general intelligence. It really comes down to having seen scenarios of things that have happened. And so that's why we believe it's critically important to get a really vast amount of experience before you deploy trucks in a driverless fashion, in a productized way out there on the road. So that's software. And then on the hardware side, there's a lot of great work going on across OEMs and tier ones and others in terms of building the types of redundant systems that are needed for these types of vehicles. So I think there's basically all the different components. You want to have really high redundancy, really high reliability, And so there's a lot of work going on there. Then on regulatory, this is an area where I think there's a lot of interest and sort of positive interest in this type of technology, because people realize, as you look at the next horizon in terms of safety and efficiency and so on, that this technology will make a big difference. But I think there's still open questions in terms of what's the right way to approach this. How do we have the right evidence that everything is really truly safe before we release these systems? And that's again where we think that this sort of data-driven approach of incrementally demonstrating the safety of the technology and creating value today is critically important in terms of helping regulators understand what this technology is capable of, and progressively, moving down the road towards being ready to release some of it. And I think the same is true of public acceptance. That's also something where the public needs to be comfortable and feel like this is really making roads safer. And I think that just is something that takes a lot of time and experience.
Right, for sure. I appreciate your comments on having experience about what's happening on the road behind you or around you and around the vehicle, and the vehicle can see far more and far more accurately in a lot of ways than people can see, and just those things that human behavior. We'd like to think it's really predictable, but sometimes can be wildly unpredictable, especially if people are staring at their phones and texting and doing all sorts of stuff. Two bullet points I do want to go back to, too, because I don't want them to get lost. One, the retrofit capabilities of the Plus, the Level 2 Plus system now. I think it's really interesting because we're at a time in the market where to get on the OEM level, to get a lot of these features, you need to have a new truck rolling off the line, and they're still just can't keep up with demand right now. And we're hearing reports from fleets that might have a 3 to 4 to 5 year turn cycle now slipping into 6 and 7 years, right? And safety is a huge bullet point for a lot of fleets operating today. The guidance or driver assistance systems, big in helping improve that safety. But you mentioned fuel economy as well and the impact there, and just how much that can bring when you standardize to some degree the operation of the vehicle and take those little human behavior inconsistencies out of it, how much fuel that saves. And there's a benefit there, it always goes to safety, then the driver retention recruitment problem or challenge, but then there's also the fuel efficiency, and I thought that was really important.
Yeah, no, I think, and in addition to some of those things, there have also been new things we found as we actually got this in customer hands, and so there's some new things we're now working on to continue to advance the technology. So, for example, one of those is working on bridge stripe prevention. Mm-hmm. So being able to, with this type of advanced sensing and compute, being able to actually detect the height of bridges in real time. Oh, sure. And being able to warn the driver. So this just becomes another added system to sort of make driving safer, right. Because that's something that actually still happens out there a lot these days. And so as we started to talk to people, that was actually one of the most requested new features for us to be able to add on and roll out on top of this.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So, and you mentioned the incremental demoing of the technology, rolling it out, increasing capabilities with the technology too. As you're working with fleets and they're rolling this into their operations, how are you educating them? How are you making the drivers comfortable today? And then how do you see that developing as you add these new features and we move to Level 4?
Yeah, I mean, so the goal here is really just to help people understand the technology, and so we have driver training both sort of in the vehicle and outside of the vehicle. Driver training to help people understand what does the technology do, what does it not do, how do they operate it, and so on. Right? I think those are all things that are just an important part of educating people as they start to work with this type of really advanced Level 2 Plus type technology that they can operate in their vehicle, and that's something that we found that we were also pleasantly surprised by how receptive people were. When we were first developing this technology and sort of looking at how do we take the Level 4 technology and adapt it to be able to operate in a Level 2 Plus context. right? We brought in outside drivers to give us feedback on the initial system. And what we found is that the driver feedback was overwhelmingly positive. And that has continued now as we got into commercial deployment, where even people that are sometimes a bit skeptical at first in terms of how the system will work, really come to love the capabilities of it in terms of just making driving much less stressful. It takes some of the load off the driver so they can then focus on a lot of the important sort of broader aspects of safely operating the vehicle. So for example, on windy days where otherwise drivers have to fight to keep the vehicle in the lane, now the vehicle can just hold the lane and they can maintain sort of a broader situational awareness of what's going on around them. And it's things like that. Or similarly, I don't know if when you went for your ride, you got to see a lot of stop and go traffic, but we usually try and set up those ride and drive type events in places that have a lot of traffic, so people can see how it manages merges and,
Right.
and heavily congestion and so on, which is also a really stressful part of driving a truck. And now with the vehicle handling that under the driver's supervision, it really frees up a lot of their attention to focus on the broader situational awareness, and it's less fatiguing, so that they can really stay on top of things better.
Yeah, for sure. I do recall there was a good amount of traffic. There was merging, there were lane changes, there were brake lights. Really interesting to see how the system handled it, and the communication to the driver of what was being handled. Right, that component of it as well was really interesting to see. Real time feedback to the driver, the system letting the driver know, hey, this is what's happening, or here's whether it's on the screen and the system and how it's operating, or the audible alerts. I thought was really additive to that experience.
Yeah. And then another, I think, important aspect of the education is also really helping drivers understand sort of what does the general outlook look like for this type of automation technology and the impact it has on jobs, because I think that is also sometimes a concern. And so, from our perspective, drivers that enter the profession today are going to retire as drivers. This type of advanced technology applied as a driver in product like Plus Drive, we think really has really broad market applicability and will help drivers stay in the driving career longer. And so it can help address some of that driver shortage. And then when it comes to fully driverless, I think that will be a very gradual process and something that starts in sort of very discrete areas. And so we don't expect this technology to have a negative impact on jobs. Right? This is really something that is going to be, we see as helping drivers and making driving safer, rather than anything to be concerned about. And so we think that's also an important part of just the education process and getting drivers used to the technology.
Yeah. People bring an inherent value to the business, and the trucking industry for sure is a lot of people skills as well. Real quick, lastly, I know you touched on regulation. I know you mentioned that there's going to be a lot of education going in that regard with legislators and regulators. But what, if any, regulation do you see associated with either that would support or maybe challenge the technologies, or anything that you're keeping an eye on right now, or is it still very much learning phases?
Well, so for the technology, so the core technology we've productized initially in this level 2+ system, and so that fits entirely within the current regulatory construct. So both in the U.S. and in Europe, where we're working with Iveco on a range of level 2+ to level 4 solutions, there in both environments, this technology really fits right within the current regulatory construct and framework. When you look out further down the road and think about some of the applications in a level 4 driverless type situation, there are some things that need to be adapted, and I think people are looking at that in terms of just how does in the U.S. how does that regulatory situation work today between the states, the federal government, and who regulates what aspects of that in terms of licensing drivers and so on. And so I think there are a lot of discrete issues to be worked out along the way. And the situation is somewhat similar in Europe, where there are, I think, again, in both places, regulators are supportive and see the positive impact that this technology will have in the long run. But there are a number of things to work through and on the way there, just to make sure that as you start to have this technology deployed, you're doing it in a very responsible and safe way.
Right. Well, Shawn, I appreciate you taking the time to educate me on a lot of this. I mean, I know I had the great opportunity to ride in the Plus Drive system and learned a lot there, but I learned a ton here in the overarching road to level 4 autonomy. And I'm sure I will talk to you again soon as we inch ever closer.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me today. It was really nice to be here.